Today, we're going to listen to Browne, who is the VP of Global Talent Acquisition at LinkedIn. And he's got a story to tell. So welcome, Browne on stage.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Browne. I work in recruiting at LinkedIn. I also make music. You can pick up that album anywhere you get music. My name is DJ Blue. That album is called Both Hands. Pick it up. Seriously. So I am here to talk about something very, very important, which is how storytelling is going to save you from robots. I got something to read before I jump in. So this was a recruiter who reached out to me recently. Hi, Brendan. I hope all is well. I don't know this person from Adam, by the way. I wanted to reach out in regard to a new CTO search we're executing for a tech company you know well. Do you have a few minutes to chat today or tomorrow? Hit me back. It actually says hit me back. I didn't respond. Literally 2 weeks later, hi, Brendan. Following up here, it would be great to get your thoughts on the Global Chief Talent Officer search we're executing. Do you have any time to chat this week? I still didn't respond. 2 weeks later, again, hi, Brendan, following up again. Do you have any time to chat next week or so? It would be great to get your thoughts on the Chief Talent Officer search. Thanks. So how many people have received those types of messages from recruiters? Get your hands high. I candidly think, and I'm sure this person is very capable, I think this is an embarrassment to all of us in recruiting. As a missed opportunity. Now this one, you don't have to raise your hands. You can mentally raise your hand. But how many people are guilty of sending those types of messages? I've done it. It happens. So let's get into storytelling. What is storytelling all about? And it's something that I'm deeply, deeply passionate about because I think the art is dying. That whole kind of conversation around storytelling, whether it's in an email, whether it's over a coffee, I joke that the line that I get from recruiters who try to contact me is something to the effect of, like that InMail said, we're growing like crazy, we got really smart people, would love to chat with you. What the hell is that? That's such a missed opportunity because she is probably representing an incredible company that has a mind-boggling story. But the deal is that storytelling starts with every single interaction, from the very first interaction that you have with candidates. So think about what you do now. I'm buried in recs. I have no time. I want to talk to less candidates, more of the right candidates, and tell and share my story about my experience with LinkedIn with candidates because I know that that's going to, one, convert them into brand ambassadors for the company and ideally will exponentially increase my chances of closing that candidate when it comes to offer time. So think about whether you are prioritizing storytelling in your day-to-day. I don't know, but based on my experience, both interviewing at companies over the many years I've been in this type of profession, literally 2 people have actually done storytelling that moved me about the company. One was Jeff Weiner when I got hired at LinkedIn, and another was my first boss at a company called Sapient when I worked in Boston, Massachusetts. A guy named Mike White taught me about storytelling from the very beginning of my career. Everything in between, I've had phone calls, interviews, I come out of these things, I'm like, I don't even know what this company's about, I don't even know what you're about. That's a failure, I believe. So let's dig in further. This is our time. Talk to any CEO. If you see Jeff Weiner walking around or hit him up on LinkedIn and say, hey, what's your number one operating priority for the company? What will he say? Talent, without hesitation. He'll say talent. Ask any CEO. It's the number one thing, whether you produce hard goods or you're a technology company or a retail company, oil and gas, whatever it is. Talent is what makes the difference. And now with all the tools, data, influence that we can assert on the businesses we support, we're in the most unique position, I think, at any time in the history of talent acquisition, in the history of HR, without question. However, times, they are changing. I've shared this picture pretty much at every Talent Connect talk I've given. This is a guy named Browne. That may or may not be his real name. He's not in the witness protection program, although his photo looks like he might be. So I would call Browne, I'm probably dating myself, much earlier in my career, this is what I would do. Browne, it's Brendan, and I would like the corporate directory of company XYZ, click, hang up. 3 days later, sure enough, on my desk in Cambridge, Massachusetts, in a manila envelope was the corporate directory of company XYZ. And what was in that corporate directory? Phone numbers. A name, a title, and phone numbers. And I'm doing the happy dance, being like, I am the best recruiter in town because I feel like I've got a strategic advantage because I found people, because I have a name and phone number. You all know this. The premium that used to be placed on that type of activity has been nuked. Whether it's the open web or LinkedIn, finding a name. Is everyone on the open web? Is everyone on LinkedIn? Of course not. But I don't have to pay Bruno to do whatever he does, the nefarious activities he does, to get that information. And if I get a bunch of names and numbers now, it really doesn't amount to a hill of beans. Finding people is not where the premium is. So why am I focusing on storytelling now here today with you all? Well, because times have changed. That's one way times have changed. The premium is not on your sleuthy sourcer. I literally believe you're going to be out of a job over time. So you need to think about some other skills, those human skills. So here is a chart that our wonderful LinkedIn Talent Solutions marketing team did 2 years ago, went out and actually talked to 9,000 of us in recruiting, including some of you, I'm sure, to understand what was happening at the convergence of AI automation with the sort of human side of our jobs. So on one axis here, on the y-axis, you can see value with human touch from low to high, and on the x-axis, we have high to low on automation potential. So one is, what is the impact a human can make? And then what can and can't be automated? In the place we want to focus, which gets back to why the urgency now around getting kick-ass and world-class and mind-blowing at storytelling is because this. You've heard the expression, oh, off the charts. Storytelling literally is almost off the charts on this graph. It is the highest value thing that can be done based on the research that we did with all of us in talent acquisition to say, what is the most impactful skill that you can acquire and have and hone and master in the world of talent acquisition, particularly in a world that's getting automated? It's storytelling. So as I was thinking about what I was going to potentially talk about, dug into all this research and realized things are changing, and people really need to realize that our job is not filling jobs. I don't believe that to be true. And this is where I really geeked out, and this is a true story. I didn't fail biology once or twice. I failed biology 3 times. I literally had to repeat the 9th grade. That is a true story. So it took me a long time to understand these concepts. But I dug into the science side of it. Some folks sort of turned me on, tipped me off, said, dig into the neurology of what's going on around storytelling. There's plenty of information out there. But what's happened over the past couple decades is that scientists and researchers have been able to understand what's going on in the brain in terms of your circuitry and what happens in terms of behavior, events, interactions in your life, and what happens neurologically, and what the correlations are to certain types of activity and behavior, what the causation is, et cetera. So as an example, so a lot of things around storytelling, I see recruiters saying, I need the facts and figures. How much revenue do we have? How many employees? Hi, it's Brendan calling from XYZ company. We've got 250 employees, and we're growing at 20%. That's not going to capture people's imagination. And here's what's interesting. I'm not just telling you this because I think boring things are boring. This is what happens in your brain. So the second you start telling someone a story that's really focused on boring facts and figures, 2 areas within the brain start lighting up. And your brain is starting to look for context and meaning, context and meaning, context and meaning, i.e., is there a story in this data you're telling me? And if there's not, this is what happened. You put people to sleep, literally, or the information is actually going in one ear and out the other. And this happens all the time. A small example of it was, hey, you bored me with your in-mail, delete. Missed an opportunity. If that captured my imagination, more areas of my brain would light up. So here's what happens in an fMRI. People have heard of MRI. fMRI is a functional magnetic resonance image where we can now see what's going on in the brain. So like I mentioned, it's boring, just statistically oriented, 2 areas of your brain light up. So if you start changing things up and make it a little bit more immersive, start telling a story, I want to share an example of just a basic thing. So this is my friend. She's in British Columbia making some beautiful parallel turns on a beautiful sunny winter day. So now what's going on in your brain are 5 times as many areas within your brain are starting to light up because you're being engaged in a new and different way because of this information. Literally, your motor cortex is being engaged, the area of your brain which is connected to physical activity and exercise. Maybe you're imagining what it's like if you're cold, or what's it like to be on that slope. That is what starts happening when you start pulling people into an interesting story. Or just take a picture of some delicious barbecue. I apologize to all the vegetarians or vegans in the audience. And these are all from local Dallas spots, which I'm really hoping to try out in the next couple days. But when you see this, or if I started talking to you about juicy barbecue or amazing brisket that's been on the grill for hours, or smoked steak, or whatever it might be, the sensory cortex within your brain gets engaged, even though you're not sitting there eating barbecue. So this is the part of storytelling, the science behind it, that gets me really, really excited. So this is what happens when you start telling someone a story where they get engaged. Literally, if you were hooked up to an fMRI right here, and I was playing those videos for you, and I showed you a graph that was boring, 2 areas of your brain light up. If I showed you, here's my friend skiing in British Columbia, look how amazing it is, 5 times as many areas of your brain light up. Now think about this in your storytelling. If you're short-circuiting your storytelling with your candidates, little tiny story, 2 minutes, and you think you're storytelling, I say you fail, myself included. If I do that, that's a missed opportunity. Because what's more is, this gets released in the brain. Oxytocin. Anyone know another name for oxytocin? The love drug. So when you're telling someone a story and you're connecting, oxytocin gets released in the brain, and oxytocin activates feelings of empathy, friendship, trust, gratitude. Scientifically, I'm not just telling you this to tell you, this is science behind it. So think about that. Think about the missed opportunity if you're not truly telling a story to your candidates and your competitors have decided we are going to be kick-ass at storytelling and we're going to have oxytocin all over the place. I know if we have a conversation and great stories happening, my chances of getting you engaged with the company and being a promoter of the company and ideally becoming an employee of the company someday goes up a lot when this type of chemical gets released. And that's not all. This is where I just start geeking out. Like, this is unbelievably incredible. So that's happening. Now let's picture this. Maybe I'm a candidate. You're telling me the story about your amazing company. Not a 5-minute story. Maybe it's 20 minutes over coffee. It takes time to tell this story. Your brain and my brain get into something that scientists call entrainment, which means is our brains and our thought processes start converging and merging. I am going to be looking for, where do I show up in this story? I'm looking for patterns, looking for context. And if I can find myself in your story, we are literally writing the story of me potentially working at your company together, scientifically. So that to me is just absolutely mind-boggling, no pun intended. It's just mind-boggling that that is what's happening behind someone's eyes if they're listening to your story. And to cap it all off on sort of why now, why the call to action, why the call to leadership to be a great storyteller, messages delivered as stories can be 22 times more memorable than facts alone. 2x, 5x, 10x is a ton. 22 times more memorable. And I just keep going back to, if my biggest competitor is prioritizing storytelling, and I'm not, they got a 22x more chance that that candidate is going to remember their company when they go home and talk to their friends, spouses, buddies, whatever it is, and we're going to make an impression around making memories. So that's why I'm here talking about why now. I'm sure you've been like, storytelling, not a new thing, blah, blah, blah. Times are changing. There's a lot of science behind this, and I think we all have a massive opportunity to be the best storytellers in our companies. So fast forward. So getting into storytelling happened very early in my career. I mentioned this guy, Mike White, who taught me about it very, very early on. And fast forward to my time at LinkedIn. About 2 weeks before I actually started at LinkedIn, I had accepted the offer. I was on the phone with Jeff, our CEO, and our CHRO at the time, and kicked off a search to hire a head of engineering. And it was priority search for the company, as before the company went public, et cetera. And I said, all right, yep, I'll dive in. I'll start making a list of names and start doing some outreach to some folks that I know. So one person on the list was this guy who works at a very well-known tech company that begins with the letter A. You can take a couple of guesses as to which one. He's a well-known guy. He knew a lot about LinkedIn, so he's familiar sort of in the orbit of LinkedIn and the people at LinkedIn. And we're chatting, and he says, Brendan, I love LinkedIn. I love the product. You got some talented folks over there, but like, aren't you guys sort of like done building what you're building? It seems like a good product. Like, what is there to do? And I fumbled and stumbled my way through this conversation, but get off the phone. This is even before I started working at LinkedIn, being like, oh my God, we need a story to tell because clearly people don't understand it. I whiffed on the opportunity to capture his imagination. Maybe he would be the head of engineering at LinkedIn if I had had the chops and been armed with the right story to tell him. So that was alarm bells going off. So start at LinkedIn, and I'm like, we got to start developing this story. And sort of my approach is I am going to copy the guy who's the best storyteller at the company, our CEO, word for word. The guy's good at it. I don't need to make up anything. So I would literally go to any meeting that Jeff was in where it was sort of a group meeting or anywhere I could hear him talk or watch videos and literally transcribe what he was saying and practice it just to develop my story. So this is one example of literally
LinkedIn's vision,
what we copied.
our dream, is to create economic opportunity for every member of the global workforce, all 3 billion people in the global workforce. And we want to profoundly impact and change the lives of every one of them. The way we're going to do that is by developing the world's first economic graph. In other words, we're going to digitally map the global economy. What does that mean specifically? We're going to have a profile for every member of the global workforce. We're going to have a profile for every company in the world. We're going to have a digital representation of every job and every skill required to obtain those jobs offered through those companies. We're going to have a digital presence for every higher educational organization and university that enables people to obtain those skills. And we want to make it easy for every individual, every company, and every university to share their professionally relevant knowledge to the extent they're interested. And in doing so, the hope is that we can lift and transform the global economy. It's not enough to just standardize the data around the skills required to obtain a role. It's important that we're training today's workforce for the jobs that are and will be, and not the jobs that once were.
So Jeff's obviously a pretty articulate guy. I think that's like 1 minute and 13 seconds. Not a lot of time. But you'd be surprised on the time it takes to actually acquire that type of language and that type of articulation. But it was what we decided to do just right out of the gate. So that sort of got us going. So if you're out there trying to figure out what to do, go find the best person in your company who tells the story in a way that captures people's imagination, and go find the folklore behind it and really start acquiring and immersing yourself in that story. But that wasn't enough. So that's a building block for us. So we wanted to do a lot more. So we step back and say, I've been in places where it's like, yeah, we're going to practice storytelling. It's going to be a brown bag lunch or a lunch and learn kind of thing. Come by for an hour. We spend 2 entire days without any recruiter who starts at the company, brick by brick, building someone up to make sure that they have all the components of what it takes, not only to understand the LinkedIn story, understand where they fit into the LinkedIn story, and how to articulate it in a very authentic way. And these are just the components of, generally speaking, what we believe is important in telling a story. One, why are you telling this story? Start with the end in mind and make sure you're very clear on what type of outcome you want. Don't just tell it to tell it. Grab attention, which does not mean you have to be extroverted or animated or high energy. But why would people even listen to you? I mean, just starting with an email, you gave me no reason to even pay attention. None, zero, zilch. You did not grab my attention. But if you did, it doesn't stop there. You need to make sure that I stay attentive and that I care about this story that you're telling. And we'll talk about how to sort of amplify some of these components of a great story. And then enable. You don't want someone to just sit there. You want them to ultimately probably take some action, whether it's go tell the story and pass it on, self-select in to join your company, raise their hand to apply, whatever it might be. And the last part of a great story, which I believe it's my job, I also believe it collectively, it's potentially all of our jobs, is to make memories. Making memories with candidates, for me, is the biggest motivation. If I'm sitting down with someone, I am so stoked to really hopefully blow their mind and share a bit of myself, which always isn't that easy. But I want to make a memory for that person because I want to have a connection with them that maybe we don't hire you today, maybe we hire you in 5 years or 1 year. But one huge step is to make it a very memorable experience in sharing the LinkedIn story and my story. So those are sort of the overarching components of what makes a great story. And then about our companies, what do you need to share about your company? And I bet you people are looking at this as someone in the audience, maybe it's most of you, who might be like, duh, Brendan, okay, Well, I got to tell you, the number of people, back to the people who have blown my mind with stories, the number of people that talk to me about each of these components if they've ever tried to recruit me are few and far between, and I think oftentimes recruiters undersell all of this. So again, keep going back to if your competitors are getting deadly serious about storytelling and making a great story with all the right components, you're not going to be on the winning side of that equation. So let's talk a little bit more about what these things are. And wanted to share these, and there's obviously hundreds and thousands of companies with great missions and visions. But I share them because, one, ask yourself, do you know your company's vision? I won't even ask people to raise their hand on that one. If you don't, go figure it out. And you could say, I mean, I know in certain cultures, certain parts of the world, it might feel cliche or kind of squishy. I believe a mission that's clear or a vision that's clear is such a massive building block for the story of the company. So let's just take a quick glance at this. Belong anywhere. I'm a big Airbnb fan. I've stayed in Airbnbs at lots of different places. And I actually have felt, when I actually went to some Airbnbs around the world, that I do belong there. But what a cool building block, a very simple statement upon which a story can be built, which I think is really interesting. Or Nike. When people think of Nike, what do people think about? Just do it. Yes, that was probably the best ad campaign in history. But actually, really what they're focused on is bring inspiration and innovation to every athlete in the world. If I was a candidate and someone then expounded on what that really means for Nike, yeah, you would start grabbing my attention in a new and different way. So if you don't know your company's mission or vision, ask yourself why. If your company doesn't have one, ask yourself why. So very, very important. Our vision is create economic opportunity for every member of the global workforce. And to give you an idea of sort of how I kick off a story, if you're a candidate and you come in and chat with me and we're sitting down, we'll probably have a good 30, 45 minutes. We're going to take our time and talk about it. But literally sort of the opening line that I use with pretty much every candidate is, hey, let me give you the start at the most macro level, and then we'll kind of narrow into what's really going on today and in the future. But if Jeff Weiner, our CEO, walked in the room and you said, Jeff, why does LinkedIn exist? He would most assuredly cite our vision, which is to create economic opportunity for every member of the global workforce. That's how I open up every conversation and build from there. Business model, which was the next component of telling a company story. Let's be clear. People care about the financial viability of companies, the financial future, the fiscal responsibility of companies. It matters a lot. If you don't know how your company's business model works, go find the person at the company who can explain it to you. And you know what? You'll start to become the recruiting hero at your company. They'll tell their peers, maybe someone in finance or business operations, hey, Susie popped by. I didn't even know her. She's a recruiter. She came by. She wanted to know about our business model. She wanted me to take her through in detail. We have to know that stuff. It's important. Why? Because you got to differentiate what your company's doing. And by the way, the world is littered with startups that die. And it's not just startups that die, 9 out of 10. Anyone remember a company called Kodak? Yeah, RIP to Kodak. I mean, it's a cool company that just literally couldn't adjust their business model. So whether big or small, you need to be talking about business model. So now let's talk about growth, and I need a volunteer to do this. I'm going to show you a little bit about what we actually do when talking about growth. So anyone want to be brave enough to come on up? All right.
Go for it.
All right. Perfect. What's your name?
Sarah Glacius.
All right, come on up here. Okay. So I am going to walk you through literally the conversation that we have with the candidate when talking about growth, and we teach our recruiters to do it. So this would be probably 15 minutes into a discussion. I'd pop up if I was sitting in a conference room, and I'd say, Sarah, it's Sarah, right? Sarah. I'd literally do this. I'd say, Sarah, here, take this marker.
Okay.
And can you draw a circle about yay big? Awesome. Oval's cool. Can you write the word?
Kind of an egg.
Can you write the word members right there?
Members?
Yeah. Okay. And right here, put GWF, which stands for Global Workforce, and put 3.3 billion under it, or next to it, whatever you like. Perfect. And then right here, draw a circle maybe about a quarter of the size. Well done, well done.
Okay.
Give her a round of applause, there's a lot of detail.
All
right, this little circle right there.
Right here?
Yeah, maybe about a third, quarter of the size of the big one inside it, yeah, you got it.
Also an egg.
And then inside there, put 645M. Perfect. All right, I'll grab that from you. Let me get the, awesome. So Sarah, I wanted to make sure we took just a quick minute to explain sort of the picture of what the opportunity for LinkedIn is going forward. And I'm proud of the work we've done. So today we have 645 million members on the network. We had about 2 a second. Super exciting. It's a lot of scale. But the global workforce contains a lot of different types of people, and the total sum is 3.3 billion. So it's really early days for us. But my question for you, Sarah, is how do we get from 645 million to capturing all of those 3.3 billion people? How do you think we should do that?
First, we have to connect them all
Yep.
so that they have access to the internet.
Yep. That's a good, yep. There are people that don't have access to the internet. That's a great point.
Okay.
Yeah. What else?
Have to educate them on what LinkedIn is for and why they should join.
Yeah. These are great ideas, by the way. Yeah. These are amazing. Yeah. That absolutely true. Those are all true. The number one sort of overarching thing, talent. It's why you're here. We don't have all the answers. We have a strategy, we have a vision, we have a longer term roadmap. But just like you're saying, yeah, there are people in parts of the world that don't even have access to the internet. How does LinkedIn execute on our vision if we actually can't get the internet to people? So really the priority for us, above all else, is making sure that we have the right people at the company. And perhaps you're one of those people who can help us help some of those people that aren't yet on LinkedIn, maybe don't even have the internet. So that's what we do. Round of applause for Sarah.
Thank you.
And when I finish that up, I usually add, and Sarah, please go out and talk to as many great companies as you can. And if there are people at other companies you want to talk to, I'm happy to introduce you to them. But when you go out and talk to those other companies, ask the recruiters to do this for you. Ask them to get up at the whiteboard and explain to you what the heck is going on at their companies in terms of future growth. I think it's very important so you can make the best decision. So that's just one example of what we do to try to pull candidates into the conversation, even by giving them the pen and sharing with them sort of where we're going and the importance of talent in that picture. So that's a little bit about growth. And if you couldn't make it out, this is sort of the picture that we paint for people. And then culture is the other piece we want to get into. I am a huge fan of show, don't tell. You could sit there and tell me how awesome the culture is. Immerse me in your culture. Take me for a walk around campus. If I express an interest in social causes and the person who's in charge of social responsibility, jump up and take me over there and let's talk about that. And the other big thing we impress upon our recruiters is if you've been at the company literally for 1 hour, you're part of the culture and you have a story to tell. Tell it. Candidates want to hear those things. They don't want to hear the boring things about your company. They want to know what is happening from a human point of view. So make no mistake, you are a living, breathing example, an extension of your company's culture. You need to share it. So now let's transition a little bit to closing up and taking some questions. So the first thing I would ask is, are you prioritizing this? And people freak out when they hear this. You can't tell your company story in less than 20 minutes. So if you're like, I got 1 million racks, blah, 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 okay, fine. Figure out a way to make sure that every candidate's mind is blown. It's not, their minds aren't going to be blown if it's like, yeah, we're growing like mad. How much Java experience do you have? Can you reverse this linked list or whatever questions you ask your engineers? You need to make sure that you're prioritizing this, I believe. So some tips. You have to know your stuff inside out and backwards. It takes time to do that, acquire the knowledge. So you may need to structure the information and maybe even need to script it out for yourself to get to the point where you feel like no matter what comes at me, I don't need a script. I've got so much knowledge about this company and knowledge about where I fit into the company that I'm willing to share it in a moment's notice. And like I said, be spontaneous. Being spontaneous is key. Get up, move around, get at the whiteboard. If you're not using the whiteboard, I think it's a failure. Understand what the candidate really wants. How many people ask candidates, say, what is your motivation? Give me your top 3 motivators. I'm sure all of you do. This is what I tell candidates. Hey, before we get started, and I tell them, I'm not going to be interviewing you. I want you to understand this company, and I want to be as transparent as I possibly can. So I'm not going to be assessing you, but we're going to be discussing LinkedIn, so it'll be a conversation. But before I do that, I want to really understand what's most important to you. And I don't want you to give me answers like, I want to grow, I want to work with great people, I want to make impact. Everybody says those things, they're cliche. I want to know from people, and sometimes it's hard to make sure you establish the trust that they'll share. What do you dream about? For me, when I'm driving beyond 30 miles, I'm thinking about, what do I really want to do with my life? If someone came and drew that out of me, I would be pumped. So I just qualify out, don't give me those answers. What do you want to do? Do you want to be a chef? You want to be a CEO of a company? Don't hold back. What's your aspiration? Because I know that that's going to be an important part of how I'm going to shape the story that I'm going to tell that candidate. Not to pull one over on them, because yes, I want to share it. And if there's a dream that they have, by the way, that we can't fulfill, I'll tell them that too. But I want to know what's most important to people. I want to help people. And then the next piece is be comfortable disclosing about yourself. And that's something that I, historically, hell no. I grew up in a pretty private Irish Catholic family in Boston. I'm not going to tell you shit about me. That's not how I roll. Yeah. I can tell you lots of stories about that, but anyone who wants to know anything about me, I'd be like, what do you want? You want to step outside? You got a problem? That was the Boston in me. I think I've lost it since I moved to California. But one story that I share is when people say, hey, what do you really love about working at LinkedIn? I talk about the convergence of my personal life and professional life. So this is a picture of me and my son, Landon, who was 4 at the time here. And Landon was born profoundly deaf, which is, when we found that out, it was a very dark period. It was like having your heart ripped out from your chest. It's a really emotional, very difficult thing, but he's taught me far more about life than the other way around. But come to find out, one of the first people I hired at LinkedIn is gal Meg Gerlinghaus, who runs LinkedIn for Good. Their team has a couple different grants that they give out. One is called an innovation grant, where they give out $10,000 to employees who work with nonprofits for causes they care about that take advantage of technology at scale and really align with LinkedIn's vision. And Meg was telling me, hey, you should throw your hat in the ring, because I had been working with this nonprofit that teaches kids, deaf kids, how to speak. And I was like, Meg, I'm not even comfortable talking. I used to not even talk about Landon because I'd get teary-eyed and it was very hard. Like, Meg, I don't know. Plus, I have no grant. I don't know how to write a grant proposal. I don't even know what I'm doing. She got me a coach from their team, and someone to help me step through that process. Come to find out, there was an engineer who was getting involved in trying to get a grant. And his daughter went to the school that I was helping teach deaf kids how to talk. And what we decided was we wanted to use technology to help families in rural California, many of whom speak English as a second language. Maybe more agricultural families who live far outside of any major metro, don't have the money or the means to get to major metro to get help from a place like the school I was working with, which is in San Francisco, and wanted to use technology, mobile technology, and some cool software to just over the internet have audiologists teach these families how to teach their children how to talk that were deaf. So we got this grant, and needless to say, it was an awesome feeling, and we've rolled that out, and now it's actually scaling up with a lot of families in India. But it was something, if you told me before I worked at LinkedIn that would be the convergence of my personal and professional life, I'd be like, you're out of your mind. That could never happen. But it's one of the things for me, and I've had some lows and huge highs at LinkedIn. This is one of the most memorable things for me as an employee of the company. So it's something I wouldn't have talked about, but I prioritize it now because I think it's part of my story. It's part of my story at LinkedIn, and people need to hear it. And then tip number 4, get out of the conference room. I love this. So Mercedes-Benz was doing some interviewing with candidates driving around in Mercedes-Benz, which I think is awesome. Because you think about if you're taking a ride with one of your friends, or it's a pretty kind of intimate place. You're together, you can really talk and exchange ideas, et cetera, and get to know one another. I think this is awesome, and I think I'm going to start borrowing this because I think it's just absolutely genius. But get up and walk around. I'm a big fan of the walking interview, and just get up your confidence. I've been in conference rooms like, this is going to be weird. This doesn't feel like there's the right chemistry to get up, but I just pop up, you know what, let's get out of here. Let's go walk around. It makes a difference. It starts creating those memories. All right. And then tip number 5, use your product in the interview process and in the candidate experience. I don't care if you're making staplers or servers. Go into the server room and show candidates, here's a server. here's how it works, or whatever it might be. Immerse people in your product. Ask yourself, is your product in your candidate experience? If it's not, I think you're missing a huge opportunity. And this one is the coolest, because Landon, my son, sends me all sorts of playlists on Spotify. But this is one from Spotify. Recruiter was working to hire someone to head up product development for personal listening experiences and made a very unique personal listening experience and playlist for that candidate to help get them closed. I thought that was genius and totally awesome. So it's a good example of how to weave your product into your process. So now what? Well, are you prioritizing it, number one? Think right now, how much time do you spend on storytelling? And we've got frameworks of sort of how we set up our story in the back. You can grab one and take it with you. Hit me up on LinkedIn. Part of our process at LinkedIn is to design, build, and share, so any of this stuff is available to you. But build your story if you don't have it today, and don't overthink it. You can start with the people who tell the story well, bring yourself to the story, and build from there. Make it personal. How much do you disclose about yourself? How comfortable are you doing that? Make it personal. And then tell it to the world. Every candidate, every interaction, this just doesn't stop in the one-to-one interaction. It can be one-to-many. It can be over LinkedIn feed. It could be on a billboard, whatever it might be. But make sure you get your story out there, because this we do know. The robots are coming, and we may work alongside them, but they will never be telling stories like we can or capturing the imagination of candidates like we can, because I think that storytelling is the must-have skill for the recruiter of the future. So thank you. So we got about 5 minutes or so if anyone has any questions. Happy to take one. There you go, there's a mic.
Oh, I just got a microphone over here.
Okay.
Back. So you gave an example of a message you didn't respond to earlier.
Yeah.
Just briefly, in like 2 or 3 sentences, what sort of message would have you gotten back to from that person who you didn't respond to?
Where are you? Oh, hey. Yeah, it's a great question. I'd probably say there's a few basic things. This one's happened as well, where I've emailed back politely and explained that if you took an extra minute and just looked at my profile, you'd see I either have some connections to your company, or even more than that, I know your company well, so you clearly didn't do your research, which literally takes a minute. So one, do some research. Make some statements about what's going on at your company that will capture my imagination. Personalize it to me at some level. I mean, even doing things like, hey, there've been a few messages I get that like, hey, it must have been really interesting when you went from whatever. I started LinkedIn when we were under 1,000 employees to 5,000 employees. Scale matters to us. You must have some great experience. We want to learn from you, or something like that. Just take some darn time. If you're templatizing and you'll be like, I send so many in-mails, I just think that's a losing proposition. So I think it's just personalization and the first outreach makes a big difference. Yeah. I think you're good.
I'll just talk loud. Hello. There we go. Thank you. All right. My name's Rachel Listman. I work for a large tech company that starts with A. And
Okay.
Another dimension of the changing work environment is that a lot of people are remote or virtual. So I'm really interested to hear if you've had any great examples of storytelling that happens when you're not face-to-face with someone, or any suggestions.
Yeah, well, this is not the best sort of example of recruiting, although maybe there was some recruiting going on. There's a startup, about 800-person startup, and the CEO wanted some advice on recruiting, and a friend connected. I was like, yeah, sure, happy to lend some advice to the degree that I can help. And it was going to be over Zoom or something like that, and jumped on there. The guy, he was sitting outside with a very cool background, which helped. And when we were talking, I'd ask questions about certain things, like, what are you trying to solve, or how do you do this? He would then, he would pull stuff up like in the window and share stuff about, he'd either show me product stuff that was going on, or how do you think about your culture at your company? He's like, well, let me bring up some information for you and step you through it. That to me was just small things that the person did that made a humongous difference? It's a really good question because I'm a huge proponent of like, it doesn't really matter where you live, but mastering sort of an immersive story over something like VC is something I think probably needs some work. Yeah. You can just shout it out, I can repeat it.
I know you were talking about the multiple pillars of storytelling, growth, culture, things of that nature. Is there more impact in certain pillars during the lifetime of a candidate experience? Like, is growth, talking about growth and culture more important at the beginning of the story of the candidate experience, the latter part? Have you seen any research around that?
Yeah, I mean, I could tell you a little bit about the sort of the flow. I mean, I really try to start at the macro with almost sort of like the growth woven in at the beginning, which is like, hey, here's our vision, and there's 3.3 billion people in the global workforce. We have over 600 million of them. We have a long way to go. Let's talk about what we're going to do. I would not jump into the business model. I would almost leave the business model potentially to the end and really capture someone's thoughts around your culture and values, which I think needs to be some type of immersive experience. And then it's almost like, oh, by the way, we're financially growing like mad, or whatever it might be. Our growth rate is impressive, because I want people to self-select into the culture as much as possible.
Hey, Brendan. Hi.
Hi.
People from that tech company starts with an A like to ask questions. I'm one of them. So as I'd love to sit with all my recruiters while they send those emails out and create those stories, but I can't. None of us can. I'm wondering, as you move forward and the robots and our storytelling abilities come together, what is LinkedIn doing to help prompt the right type of questions inside the in-mail? How are we helping them to ask those questions with some AI assistance or some automated functionality? What are you doing for that 3-point-whatever billion who don't have those skills yet, but they are recruiters that maybe want to ask questions and be prompted on how to ask good storytelling questions?
Well, I think that's a genius idea to have sort of prompts via AI or something, or machine learning, that could come up as you're typing up in-mails. I'm going to bring that back to the product team. I think that's an awesome, really cool idea.
Interlocking circles, when you go in to create your messages, if you click on those interlocking circles, it'll show you the
common connections, yeah.
Common connections that you have. So connections, groups.
Yeah, it's an interesting one because it's a good reminder. There's something called spotlights. When you do a search result, it will start to tell you X percentage of this pool that you just did a search on have first-degree connections at your company. Y percentage actually follow your company. Z percentage are actually already in your ATS. So those are very, very referenceable. But I do think there's more that can be pulled from the profile, what it could be like, hey, this person likes opera and infrastructure engineering or things like that.
On the global scale, because not everyone's first language is English.
Yeah.
Not everyone knows what's socially or culturally right to ask.
Yeah.
And I think we need to help those recruiters develop storytelling skills in a way that is natural, and it comes off as natural, but also authentic.
It's such a good point. Such a good point.
So, I work in a global environment for A&D, and do you think that there is a need to adjust the storytelling depending? I'm sorry. Is there a need to adjust the storytelling based on the culture of the team that I'm addressing or training? Does that make sense?
So is there a need to adjust to the culture of the particular team?
Right. So,
Totally.
obviously what you just shared, it feels very normal and natural for North America.
Yeah.
But if I'm doing the same training for China or India, do you think that there's cultural norms that might help with the storytelling that we should be aware of? Or do you think that the story is just the story and that's all that needs to be shared?
I think there's nuance in terms of style, approach, how things get communicated that I would say you need to be sort of culturally versed in without question. And I'm from the US and I would need to get a lot of counsel, say, if we're going to go tell the story in Japan. But the what about the story, I think, is still the what about the story. So if there are cultures where like visions are kind of like people don't think they matter, well, they matter. In our case, to LinkedIn, it's an important concept for the company. So I think it depends, but in terms of how the communication happens, I would say go find those people on your teams or at your companies that can help you navigate a market that is not your first market. So it's a really fantastic point. So we got one. She's been waiting patiently, so I'll take this one and then we'll close.
Thank you. Do you have any advice for Thank you. Do you have any advice for how do you tell the story when you're in the middle of reductions in force? So I know, fake news, right? No? So do you have any advice, though, of like maybe to stay clear? Because I'm not a communications expert, but sometimes there's a time to pull back.
Yeah, I would hit it head on, is my take. I think I think maybe probably plenty of people in this room have been in those situations where like, wait a minute, there's a reduction in force and we're still hiring in other areas of the business. That sends a conflicting signal to the talent market. What do we say about that? Those are things that I think are interesting opportunities to go chat with folks in the business. I mean, I think you will show people that you support, hiring managers, executives, that you care a lot if you ask them that question. Hey, we just had a reduction in the force. I care deeply about the company. You know, we reduced the sales force, but we're hiring in engineering. Can you help me articulate from a business point of view what the future is going to look like? So if I'm talking to an engineer who could go to awesome company A, B, or C, I want them here. How should we position that? So I would say that's another huge part of this that I learned early is like, just go ask people at the company to help build your story, and they're going to become your best friends. And they're going to be flattered that you even reached out to them for the advice. So, yep. Thank you so much for being here, everyone. I had a lot of fun. Cheers.